That's spooky. I wanted to jump on here real quick to elaborate, to hopefully try to make sense of something. Tonight's broadcast apparently went mm, this is pissing me off. Unfortunately, that's this thing's fucking game plan. For those of you who are watching right now, I need you to comment whether or not you can actually hear me. All the channels seem secure now, but I don't know if I can guarantee something won't happen again. All right. Just looking at the settings right now. Hmm. All right. So, looks like we got somebody across all the major channels. Hi, Claire. Right now I'm a little spooked. Tonight I originally had a pre-recorded broadcast sent out through all my channels, and something just shut it down. Something completely erased everything. And that's concerning to me. Very. Because the last time we had stuff like this happen, where there was weird auditory phenomenon, where electronics got messed up, people almost died. I know it probably sounds like I'm trying to be dramatic here, but this is not something I want to be fucking around with. I have my reasons. I already know that StreamYard and a lot of Facebook, a lot of social media websites are having issues due to the constant hacking that's going back and forth due to the Russian-Ukraine situation. I don't know if that's part of it. Apparently, I somehow ended up on Russia's radar for a couple of things. Exactly what, I don't know. But that's the thing. Claire James, she's just asking if I was hacked. Only 3 parties have access to this. Access to the emails as well. If I was hacked, they were thorough. Tonight's subject matter was supposed to be about a particular being with less possible ET origins that's known to kill people. If not by his own hand, he's known to manipulate situations in order to cause death. He is death, in a way. It's concerning. I already uploaded the podcast to the audio channels, so if you follow us on like Spotify, Amazon Music, things like that, I checked through. It's mostly clear, but there's still something trying to come through, interrupting the broadcast. People wonder why I don't show my ghost hunting videos as much. Because lately, whenever I have to get called out, something nasty always comes up. We don't need that shit spreading around. Tonight, I was supposed to talk about the Lord of Shadows, as I call him. I utilize that name because the name a lot more people would be familiar with. Well, the author has that term copyright somehow, trademarked, I should say. How she managed to do that, I don't know, probably because she wrote a book on the matter. But the reason why I was doing that particular subject is because that entity has resurfaced. We have confirmed attacks out of Virginia, London, Mars City, Pennsylvania, as well as anomalous attacks in Scotland and here in Idaho. Those of you who know the group I came from, Valentine's weekend last year, you may be familiar with what happened. I don't mention that group while on lives due to some concerns of legal liabilities with their affiliations. This thing attacked. Iron City Paranormal reached out to myself and Chris because the owner of that shop, for the first time ever, was physically attacked. He has claw marks running up his side. And this was after, interestingly enough, this was after a gargoyle statue mysteriously turned up at the shop and was brought in after one of the employees thought it was just a weird decoration that the owner initially purchased. We consulted a demonologist contact, and he speculates that there may be some sort of attachment that was associated to that sort of event, to objects being sent out under unusual circumstances. And let's face it, these days where got porch pirates, it's almost guaranteed to be invited in if it attaches itself to something, wouldn't it? Upon further conversations with the demonologist contact, he brought to my attention that he himself has been dealing with certain events that took place literally right at the same time. Yeah, obviously there's time zone differences, but once we figured out the math, we all had something happen within the same 15-minute window. And that's me being generous. And this goes back to last Saturday's interview following Sunday. I mentioned that there was phantom lightning outside my house. And I say phantom lightning because absolutely no meteorological evidence yet was gathered for that time frame to show that there was anything other than clouds in the sky. There were no flights in the air to cause that. I'm in a very rural area, so if we start having activity like that for flights, that's highly unusual. There was a small police-issued drone that was in the area due to a standoff that was going on about 3 miles from my house. But it doesn't fit. I'm stressed because I'm concerned about some people. I'm concerned some people might be about to get hurt by something who takes death as its Viagra practically. So we're going to try to disclose some of that information tonight. Because this particular being, we have reason to believe that every culture that has some sort form of Grim Reaper, God of Death, something that fits along those lines, it's pointing back to him. He does not work alone. He's almost as old as humanity itself. And he became how he was because he murdered his own brother. I'm going to try to give the Cliff Notes version because I don't know if this broadcast too is going to get shut down. People have asked me what this thing is. It doesn't fit any part one category that we utilize within supernatural research. It hits them all. And there's going to be topics tonight that do hit religious background. I will remind everybody that this is only brought up for educational purposes, for research purposes, not to preach any sort of dogma. And you know what? I'm just going to say it. This being is known as the Hatman. A lot of groups associate it with sleep paralysis and Benadryl overdoses. Yeah. Apparently, there's some idiots out there who are purposely overdosing on Benadryl in order to try to see him. And Drew's paranormal vlog just makes a very good point. If he's wanting something, he'll stick around. Main reason why he's probably sitting out back like that is because he doesn't see a way in. But if he truly wants to hurt someone in particular, he'll wait. He'll wait for the defenses to come down. One of the early instances of that came to my attention on just how strong this thing is was a possession involving a gentleman who was going through cancer treatments. And shortly after that incident, his condition worsened. He's still alive today, but he does accredit it to other visitors that he received. I mentioned before that this thing is old, almost as old as civilization himself. The being known as the Hatman, for those of you who somehow don't know, it's a shadow being. It looks like a shadow being that wears kind of a wide-brimmed hat and a long trench coat or cloak. The descriptions. I'll get to that here in a second, Drew. That somewhat evil laugh probably doesn't help the situation. But here we go. The description of the wide-brimmed hat and the long cloak seems to be a relatively recent one. Like I said, research indicates that every god of death, every version of the Grim Reaper that's out there all over the world points to this thing. A gentleman pointed my direction into Breton mythology where they discussed an Anku, which is, again, their version of the Grim Reaper. Sometimes it appears as an old man taking a wheelbarrow, supposedly to carry off souls. Another description is some sort of blade, the long cloak, and the wide-brimmed hat. This particular origin story caught my interest because now, naturally, when it comes to these things, you're going to get variations of the lore. One version tells that there's more than one to different regions of the world. One version says that it's a mantle of sorts, a job. That whoever is the last person to die within a certain, say, a year cycle takes up the mantle. Then there's the third one that says the original Anku was none other than the firstborn son of Adam and Eve. And for those of you who are not caught up in your Bible schooling, the firstborn son of Adam and Eve was known as Cain. Cain was a farmer. And the story goes that he grew very jealous of his younger brother, Abel, who God seemed to favor Abel's sacrifices more. So, eventually, Cain killed him, then wandered off to the land of Nod. It is likely inconsistencies within how the Bible is presented today offers up the possible solution to this story that there was never just Adam and Eve. They were the first, they may have been the first modern humans, but they weren't the only humans. Evolutionary records, I believe there was at least 8 different hominid, human-like species on Earth that interbred, because that's just how we are. But here's the thing. I'll get to that here in a sec, Drew. That too. The real story, it's not if recent research indicates is anywhere close to it, because, mind you, this is talking about the origins of humanity. A lot of information has gotten twisted over the years just because of humans' real bad habit of not trying to make sure they set the record straight, or consider it the longest game of telephone. You look in the story of Cain himself. Some speculated that Adam was not Cain's biological father. The serpent in the garden, one we attribute to Lucifer, actually was. And you have to remember there's stories about angels interbreeding with humans. It's the whole basis for one of the bases for ancient alien theory. That basically the story goes that Eve had an affair with the serpent and birthed Cain. The story of the serpent itself is twisted. We all associate it with Lucifer, the devil. But the thing is, it was something much stronger than Lucifer. Yeah, Lucifer was real. There was actually an old king named Lucifer. But the whole image of Lucifer being associated as the devil is kind of an amalgamation. Several different entities kind of got blended over time into the modern interpretation of what we view as Satan. However, the word Satan does not mean devil. It means opposer, opponent. It was more of a verb in its usage. The only time it was ever actually a noun, a name, was when it was in the original text as Ha-Satan. The only being that was ever directly referred to as Ha-Satan or the Satan was an archangel known as Samael, whose name roughly translates into the venom of God, the blindness of God. He controlled death. And it is speculated that Samael was the real serpent, had an affair with Eve, birthed Cain. So let's take it certain situations of domestic violence nowadays, because human psychology has not changed a lot over this our time here on Earth. Who's to say Adam knew? He didn't know. He knew that Cain was not his son, and he resented him for it. Even the most well-adjusted people, who wouldn't be ticked off that they found out their significant other cheated on them, right? So, and there's a whole debate of, was he, maybe they were poly back then, they wouldn't know monogamy back then, blah, 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 blah. Just work with me here, okay? That Adam may have taken out his frustrations on Cain. That builds up a resentment. Just stick with me here, Drew. That builds up a resentment over time. If you look at the backstories behind a lot of young men who were put into jail as young kids, the reason why they were put into jail is because they attacked and killed the person, usually a male, that either was hurting their mother or hurting their sister. So again, human psychology hasn't changed over the years. It's still relatively the same. So it stands to reason that typical sibling rivalry, Abel saw this, knew that for some reason Adam favored him. Everybody liked him because he was the youngest. And he was a bit of a smartass about it. Eventually, Cain had enough. That's when he killed him. And obviously took off because he still cared for his mother at the very least. Still their parents. No matter how much they want to bicker and fight, there's still that attachment there. So that's sounds like speculation, right? There's going to be parts of this story that I'm going to start diving into that are going to start sounding a little bit more out there for a lot of people. I imagine Drew being one of them. And not targeting you, Drew, for anything. Not being mean, I'm just saying. Just follow me here. Now, again, I mentioned before, how does this tie into ET phenomena? Well, when you really think about it, angels, demons, all the ghosts, technically, if you follow the extra dimensional side of it, all angels, demons, spirits, all of that, technically they qualify as aliens too. There's a book out that anybody can get a copy of. If I can find the links I had set up for the broadcast that was supposed to be going right now, you can read up on it a bit more and see for yourself. But there is a sort of a guidebook to alien races that was allegedly found in Siberia that was associated with the Russian government. It detailed several different alien species. You look into the Anunnaki section of it. In there, it states that Samael and Lilith were Anunnaki king and queen at the time. Story with the Anunnaki is that when they happened to come across Earth, they found genetic material. They found this planet thriving with life. They allegedly, the story goes that, yeah, Phoenix, you're probably going to have to watch this from the start because this is a long story. And I've been tailing this thing since I was at least 14. So, just lost my train there. So, Anunnaki, yeah. The story with the Anunnaki is that they left their planet in search of gold out in the cosmos because they had a way of processing the gold and then putting it out in their atmosphere to help with some sort of climate disaster. Their planet is often associated as Nibiru. A lot of people say it's Planet X, that it's the source of doomsday if it ever comes back. Their planet is allegedly tied to the solar system, but it's from a different sort of dimension. But if you actually look at the Sumerian translations, Nibiru was actually Sumerian for Jupiter. And there's allegedly a lot of ET activity there. Now, it said they came to Earth. They didn't want to do the work themselves, so they ended up creating a slave race just because they could. They had the technology. They implemented their DNA into the population that they found here on Earth, had them mine gold, had the slave population mine gold, give it to them as tribute to the gods, then they would take it back to their home world. That's why they say a lot of sites where there's supposed to be a lot of gold collected by ancient cultures, say El Dorado as an example, you will find a lot of UFO activity. Chernobyl is another matter. Now, allegedly, the Anunnaki, they grew an attachment to their creation. They interbred more. They say that the source of O negative blood was from the Anunnaki. Now, for those of you with basic medical knowledge, anybody who has O negative blood is a universal donor. It is also said that those who have O negative blood tend to be more psychically gifted. They're more spiritually inclined, and they tend to get abducted by aliens more. I'm on. As I said, Samael was royalty according to this book. So again, developed an attachment, grew close to Eve, either artificially inseminated her or did it the old-fashioned way. The Anunnaki, they are technically considered reptilian, but they are very humanoid in shape. If you look at the Prometheans from the newer Alien movies, they look just like that. Now, with the Anunnaki, it's also said to be the source of where we get a lot of our ancient gods. So, yeah, Phoenix, we already had this discussion, remember? So this is a global phenomenon, but in Cain's particular, in the Hatman, Cain, Lord of Shadows, however you want to call him, it was the first case of it going wrong. Cain likely knew his true origin, thought himself as better. And when someone has that sort of anger, it does not just go away. couple years back, just as the pandemic was starting, I had a phone call come in on one of my hotlines from a family, from a father who is moving his family across country to escape certain phenomenon that was going on in his house. I'm bringing this particular case up because this is how I managed to make even more connections. He gives me a call. I'm just barely getting off work. He's telling me all this information. He is finishing unpacking his house. He's already sent his wife and child away. He even had his wife send pictures of their one-way plane tickets to validate the story. That whatever was going on inside this house was spooking them to where they needed to run for thousands of miles away. Likely because this is where they happen to have family where they were going to, so it's a good transition point, but still. To summarize this phone call, and those of you who have heard some of my previous interviews may have heard me mention this before, but there was all the signs there. There was weird shadow beings. There was weird scratches, weird voices. Everything you can associate with some sort of negative presence. I'm going to watch my wording here. As he's telling me this story, I'm making a little note of everything. I was like, okay, all right. The main reason he called was because this thing seemed to start focusing on his 3-year-old son, who seemed to be developing some sort of abilities, which is not unusual. I even had to tell this gentleman that chances are he may outgrow them, or they may grow stronger as he gets older, or if he outgrows them, there's a chance that he could take a blow to the head and them come back. There was a lot of concern about him assaulting his child from... Basically, he was concerned that I was trying to insinuate he hurt his kid in some way, which I wasn't. I was just trying to give him a heads up that chances are this stuff isn't going to go away. I can help you deal with it, but I can also provide a guidebook for the kid because I've been there. Now, here's the interesting bit. He goes to tell me that there were parts when he was left alone with this being, they would literally be sitting on the couch talking to each other like they were old friends. And this thing, I'm starting to feel a tightness around my throat. That's another one of his motives. Hey, whoa. Something just... Drew has a point here. Something just rubbed up against my ear. What the... Was not expecting that. See what I mean? Every time I go into this story, shit happens. So, being that shit happens, clearly I'm onto something. So I'm going to keep telling it. So, fuck off. Yes, I tell a lot of goofy jokes to relieve my nerves. Haven't you noticed? Anyway, during these guys' conversations, this thing told him that he wanted that this shadow being wanted the father to become a general in his army. Like, yeah. I was like, I'm CE5 now Necro. Yeah, tempting, believe me. Now something's in here. I turn on the alarm. Anyway, like I said, the father said that this being wanted to have him as like a general in his army. Now, obviously, if this thing, right, now this thing, obviously, where he's having conversations with this being the father, he's obviously going to reveal his name. He wants to establish rapport. He wants to establish trust. So I ask him, by any chance, when you've talked to this thing, did it reveal its name? He said, "Oh yeah, it was like cane, like sugar cane." Immediately, I dropped. Yeah, Phoenix. He knows you're nervous about him. The tones, Phoenix. I gave you all the tools. Focus on this image. I use this image in order to make those protection tones. This is where, now back to the story, this is where it all starts to tie together. Because also during this phone call, I hear a voice. What sounds like a 7-year-old child. Now, mind you, the father was alone in the house. The only other things there were his dog and his cat. Now, unless the dog and cat were figured out how to talk, complete sentences, chances are it was not them. Now, I do have notes on this case. And thinking of others, it's more than just a blood type. And there's a reason. I'm going to try to speed this up a bit, but the other important thing to mention was that this thing, the voice that came through sounded like a 7-year-old child, about 5, 6, or 7, right around there. All of a sudden, he walks by a certain room in the house, the father. The wife referred to this room as the dead room, where a lot of the activities seem to be focused. Because this was the type where a room where if you just stepped in it, you would start to feel ill. You would start to feel something watching you. You would start to feel your body become heavy. He walks by this room, and all of a sudden, this voice comes through on the phone call. Says, "You put that fucking phone down, you little bitch, or I'll fucking kill you." I bring this to the guy's attention. I ask him, just in case someone happened to come in during the phone call that I didn't catch. Say, "Hey, are you still alone right now?" He's like, "Yeah, it's just me, the dog, and the cat, and I just let them out. Why? You may need to leave the house right now." He goes outside. He says, I just heard a voice what sounded like a small child threatening to kill you. Then he goes and tell me, he goes, ask me about how old was I? About 5, 6, around there. Like, yeah. You can hear the sadness in the father's voice because about 5, 6, almost 7 years before that, would have been about 9 years by now, his wife had a miscarriage. I know of at least 3 miscarriages associated to attacks by this thing. You may hear stories of fae like beings stealing kids, changelings. The story behind changelings. This thing harvests kids. It kills. Last year, the weekend of Valentine's, it attacked a group I was with. It caused people to cough up blood. It caused shadow apparitions to appear. It caused people to be hurt. It caused illness. And it caused another young lady to have to be put into a mental institution for a bit. Those who were affected the worst already had a history with this thing. Now, I'm not going to show you any more evidence that I have on it because I have people who sketched his real face. I already told you his real name, why he is the way he is. Then, all but one by one, we fell. And yeah, Drew, I just happened to go over that because I sent that live to a couple people for more information to detail what's behind this thing. And if you also look carefully, you see this thing cringes whenever it hears my name or sees me. The people who managed to bounce back all also had visitors. Some of you may know about the hybrid story where I have hybrid children. It was through them coming forward I was able to find out more about it. So once again, I'm gonna have to cut this short, but we're gonna end the show with this. If you can take a screen grab, we're also gonna be putting out some merch with this on it. Just have it around your house, keep it on you, or even set it as the background on your computer or phone. I call this the Walls of Eden. Yes, there's a pentagram in the center, but every bit of this is important. Just imagine this around you. It'll help cut off negative connections. It'll protect you and it'll help you heal. This image is also going to be implanted on a moon launch here shortly. There's a time capsule that some of you may have heard that I've put the starting 4 members of Bald and Bonkers on. And as you obviously you can tell something's happening because it's affecting my voice. I'm actually feeling a bit of a tightness. He's not liking me talking about this. That's the thing, Drew. That's the reason why I'm speaking out right now. He's far from just a shadow. This whole thing about hybrids on Earth, he was the first experiment that went wrong. in written history. Let's think about what I said. The Anunnaki are believed to be the source of many of the culture's gods and goddesses, angels, demons. It's alleged that a lot of them were actually Anunnaki in origin. The first known experiment goes wrong. The first hybrid goes wrong, becomes a killer. You're not going to really want to be talking about that, are you? Why is it all these cultures, Christianity had culture, took away any reference to hybridization between angels and humans? Why is it that they tried to suppress this information? That we didn't know about it until we happened to find older artifacts that they couldn't get to. All over the world, things are buried below our feet. The ones that we find out about are because someone didn't look hard enough. And as you said before, it's only March. Year of Revelations has begun. And conveniently enough, I just happened to come across something, and I wish I saved more notes of it so I could talk about it more clearly, but there were talks of Sir Isaac Newton using mathematical calculations in order to predict the end of the world. If I remember correctly, if I get it wrong, don't quote me, but even Sir Isaac Newton speculated that the world was going to end about 2040. Some sources that use similar calculations say 2060. More of those calculations speculated the beginning of that change would start in the year 2020. Trust me, Phoenix. He wants you to be pissed at him. He likes it. But again, try to focus on this sigil. It can help. It can also help call in more people to help fight it off if absolutely necessary. If you think you have something going on, please do let me know, because it's been awfully quiet. Now, for those of you who know, I'll just research, Drew. Part of the reason why I know about this stuff is because I got backed into a corner. I can totally tell all sorts of scary stories. But speaking of which, this Saturday, we may have to adjust. We may have to be careful because it was daylight savings today. We've had issues with scheduling because of that in the past. But this Saturday, we have Mike the Naked Bigfoot coming on. And I want to bring him up as well, because shortly after the attacks from the Valentine's Day weekend, he came on to this company stream, and all of a sudden he had voices coming through calling me by name. The last few times that Chris and I sat down to talk to him, he started going into trances relating to this stuff. So there may be a good chance there may be a showdown this Saturday. I'm not saying this to promote it. I'm just saying shit's about to get real. So I am sorry about the technical issues. I should have expected it, because the demonologist contact I have, some of you know him, AJ. He came on as the professor during the Halloween episode. He and I were having some audio issues when we were trying to talk about this situation, because he's the one that got smacked around at the same time. But anyway, those of you who came in late, go back, try to watch the earlier recording. I'm going to try to hit this on the other video channels have it pop up in the next 3 hours or so. so that way we can try to get this information out loud and clear. I seriously got to do some research to find out how to keep preventing this MSUs from happening. I have better equipment this time around. Shouldn't it be as easy? Never a dull moment, right? So, again, screen grab that image. If you have any issues with this thing, please do reach out. I did just end up making it sound like a big, scary, bad guy, but it's possible to fight off. Stay safe, stay loved, and hopefully spring is actually upon you. I say that because over here it's trying to snow, and it's the middle of fucking March. And on a little humor, right?